Step into any busy street, and you'll find yourself surrounded by a theater of performances. The suited professional strides with purpose, the rebel wears their leather armor of defiance, and the socialite posts carefully curated smiles for an invisible audience. Modern life is an endless masquerade, and like seasoned actors, we grow so accustomed to our roles that we forget we are performing at all. We act confident when we are unsure, empathetic when we are indifferent, or rebellious when we simply crave attention. Each mask serves its purpose, helping us navigate the demands of relationships, careers, and social expectations. Because of this relentless performance, we risk becoming hollow, a puffed-up bag of clothes as Nietzsche described it. For Nietzsche, this isn't just a metaphor for insincerity, it's a diagnosis of a deeper malaise. The modern individual is a surface without depth, a restless actor endlessly shifting between masks to conceal the absence of a guiding instinct. This isn't to say that masks are inherently bad. In fact, they are inevitable. Without them, we could scarcely function. But when the mask fuses with the face, when we believe the role we play is the essence of who we are, we lose the capacity to explore the many facets of our being. Or worse still, we may become prisoners of our roles, mistaking our most polished performances for authenticity. Society encourages this delusion, rewarding conformity and punishing deviation. So we parade about in 100 masks, proud of the comedy but blind to the tragedy. Nietzsche describes the modern self not as a singular entity, but as a fragmented one. Within us exists a multitude of personas, each crafted for specific contexts with its own voice and purpose. Yet out of fear or inertia, we often cling to a single mask, letting it overshadow our inner complexity. As William James writes in Principles of Psychology, properly speaking, a man has as many social selves as there are individuals who recognize him and carry an image of him in their mind. He generally shows a different side of himself to each of these different groups. From this there results what practically is a division of the man into several selves. The modern individual is little more than a totally exterior surface with no kernel, a tattered, daubed, puffed-up bag of clothes. Out of laziness and fear, we mask our individuality with veils that conform to societal norms, leaving us as nothing more than these puffed-up facades. This puffed-up bag of clothes metaphor describes the performative nature of our existence. Many people adopt and discard roles and personas as if rummaging through a worn-out bag of tricks. Day after day, they cycle through the same tired acts, lacking originality or authenticity. In this context, the mask serves as a facade to hide a weakened personality in the modern individual. This diminished self reflects a lack of robust instincts, driving people to rely on deception to project the illusion of an extraordinary life, something more compelling than a mediocre identity. Beneath all this artifice, many are simply too afraid to reveal who they are. No one any longer dares to show his person, but masks himself as a cultured man, a scholar, a poet, a politician. Individuals lacking strong inner instincts to guide their lives often turn to history or social groups to learn how to act. The mask, in this case, compensates for the absence of a guiding life force, a failure of the instincts to naturally direct one's life. As Nietzsche elaborates, he thus gradually becomes an actor and plays a role, indeed many roles usually, which is why he plays each one so badly and flatly. The modern individual, caught in this cycle of imitation, spreads themselves thin across a repertoire of borrowed roles, none of which are played with depth or authenticity. Masks are not just tools of deception or a means of blending in. Often we wear them to obscure truths we are unwilling to confront. As Nietzsche observes in Dawn, we are like shop windows in which we ourselves are constantly arranging, concealing, or illuminating our supposed qualities, which others ascribe to us, all in order to deceive ourselves. We rarely reveal ourselves to the world entirely, instead choosing a mask that hides certain aspects while selectively exposing others. Beyond concealment, the mask serves another purpose. It allows individuals to sidestep the challenging work of self-discovery and penetrating the layers of their being in pursuit of self-knowledge. Rather than confronting this task, we often imitate what appears most practical or advantageous for simply getting by. As Nietzsche elaborates, many reach passionately for the fantastic events portrayed in the theater of politics, or else themselves proudly parade about in 100 masks, performing what he describes as a common comedy and not at all themselves. Eventually, the hypocrite who persistently plays a role ceases to be a hypocrite altogether. As Nietzsche explains in Human All Too Human, if someone wants to seem to be something, stubbornly and for a long time, he eventually finds it hard to be anything else. The profession of almost every man, even the artist, begins with hypocrisy. As he imitates from the outside, copies what is effective. When we play a role long enough, it becomes second nature, an outer layer of skin we wear comfortably. Over time, complacency sets in, and we find a sense of security behind the masks of our professions, family roles, and other social identities. Nietzsche warns that people eventually confuse themselves with their role, forgetting how many other roles they could have played. Considered more deeply, the role has actually become character, and art, nature. What is often called authenticity is the self-deception of the person taken in by their own act, a mirror turned inward where the reflection believes itself to be the original. We craft our performances with such meticulous care that we become convinced the mask is the face. The role is the essence, mistaking our most practiced artifice for an unmediated truth. While the art of masking helps us navigate various situations, when the role becomes character, it limits the range of expressions available to a fully developed human being. As we adapt to the demands of our routines, the masks we wear can begin to shape us, fusing with the face beneath, until ultimately we become who we pretend to be. However, the mask can also swing to the opposite extreme. Nietzsche critiques the American attitude that anyone can assume any role, embracing boundless freedom to become whoever they wish. In such cases, the person may lose awareness that they are merely playing roles, becoming a complete actor. Nietzsche describes this phenomenon as falseness with a good conscience, the pleasure in dissimulation bursting forth as a power that pushes aside the so-called character, flooding and sometimes extinguishing it. The inner demand for a role and mask, to enter the mode of seeming, an abundance of all kinds of adaptability that can no longer be satisfied in the service of the most immediate and narrow utility. Nietzsche observed that Western society seems incapable of doing without that masquerade which one calls clothes. But it is not only clothes we use to conceal our flaws. Morality too serves as a mask, not to hide wickedness, but to obscure the mediocrity, weakness, and shame of the domesticated modern individual. Western man disguises himself with morality because he has become a sick, sickly, crippled animal that has good reasons for being tame. For he is almost an abortion, scarce half made up, weak, awkward. It is not the ferocity of the beast of prey that requires a moral disguise, but the herd animal with its profound mediocrity, timidity, and boredom with itself. Our mediocrity and timidity are embarrassing even to ourselves, so we mask them by acting sophisticated, virtuous, or educated. Some go to the other extreme, wearing dark clothing, leather jackets, tattoos, piercings, all in an attempt to hide the shameful sight of the tame animal that morality has reduced us to. Nietzsche even notes how women have become so artistic in their self-presentation that they feel the need to put on something even when they take everything off. The result is a world where everyone is an actor. There is no longer a need to visit the theater, Nietzsche suggests, because the comedy plays out on the streets. People proudly parade about in 100 masks, embracing what Nietzsche calls the common comedy of society, where no one is truly themselves. We call this elaborate performance society, and take pride in ourselves, believing ourselves to be everything we pretend to be. For men will believe something is true if it is evident that others believe in it firmly. The practice of masking or acting suggests that masks hide what we call the self. It implies that beneath these facades lies an authentic identity, one obscured by the various roles and persona we assume throughout the day. This belief leads to the idea that one could, if they chose, abandon all pretense and simply be their real self. But what would that self look like? Would it be a coherent, authentic core? Or would we find nothing at all beneath the masks, a void under the surface, an emptiness beneath the constructs we call identity? Most of us go through life convinced that the voice we hear in our heads, our ego consciousness, is the essence of who we are. It feels solid, familiar, and in control. Yet this ego, this sense of self we cling to, is not the true ruler of our inner world. It's not even a singular voice. Instead, the ego is like an actor who's been cast in the starring role of a complex, ongoing play. Its strength lies in its ability to weave together threads from all the other characters within us, creating a coherent performance. But when the ego forgets its place and tries to seize power, it risks becoming a tyrant, silencing the other voices and suffocating the richness of the whole. Imagine your inner world as a theater company. Early on, it's run like a traditional troupe with a strict director calling the shots. This director, the ego, assigns roles, approves lines, and ensures that everything looks polished and orderly. The other actors might be frustrated, but they obey. Over time, however, something starts to shift. The cast begins to trust one another, recognizing the unique strengths each brings to the stage. As they gain confidence, the rigid director isn't as necessary anymore. Scripts loosen, improvisation takes over, and the ensemble begins to shine. The real magic happens when the company becomes fully improvisational. There's no single leader shouting instructions. Instead, the actors respond naturally to the scene and each other. The most suitable voice takes the lead at the right moment, a confident advocate during a debate, a tender caretaker in times of need, or a curious explorer in moments of wonder. Each role flows seamlessly into the next, creating a rich, adaptive performance that feels effortless and alive. This kind of inner harmony isn't about silencing the ego or letting chaos reign. It's about building trust and communication among all the voices within us. When we stop trying to dominate the stage with a single character and let the entire cast contribute, life becomes a richer and more spontaneous experience. By loosening the ego's grip and letting the whole ensemble have its say, we step into a more vibrant way of living. Every voice, every figure within us, has something valuable to offer. When we learn to trust the process, the self becomes not a fixed identity, but a creative masterpiece, always evolving, always in motion, and always ready to meet the next scene. This drama of life isn't merely a human construction, but the way the world essentially is. A play of puppets pulled by wires, as Arthur Schopenhauer wrote, without our being able to tell for whose enjoyment. And if this world stage play has any plan, then fate is the director. Over the years, I've grown increasingly skeptical of the exhortation to find your true self. The idea that each person possesses some unique, authentic potential waiting to be realized feels unsubstantiated. Instead, it seems we merely adopt the roles we prefer or those that circumstances impose upon us. We are perpetual actors convinced that our most carefully constructed roles represent our true nature. Yet we remain oblivious to the fact that even the desire for authenticity, this longing to uncover some genuine self, is itself a subtle and artful fabrication. But how can we know ourselves again? How can the human being know itself? It is a thing dark and veiled, and if the hair has 7 skins, the human being can slough off 70 times 7 and still not be able to say, "Now that is what you really are, that is no longer outer shell." This question of the real self becomes increasingly elusive when viewed through Nietzsche's philosophy. For him, the idea of a fixed, authentic self is a comforting illusion, an artificial construction we cling to in the face of life's chaos. Instead, Nietzsche says that each individual is a living aesthetic composition, not a solid entity with a stable core, but a fluid interplay of forces that shape and reshape us continuously. These forces are rooted in what he describes as the Apollonian and Dionysian art drives, which he identifies as the fundamental drives of existence. The Dionysian, which Nietzsche refers to as the mysterious primordial one, represents the chaotic, formless source of all things. It is life's raw, unbounded energy, the wellspring from which all creation flows, but which in its purest form is incomprehensible and overwhelming. Dionysian reminds us that beneath our carefully constructed roles lies not a singular, authentic self, but a primal unity that resists individualization, a churning sea of impulses and potentialities. This is why Nietzsche insists that any attempt to peel back the layers of the self in search of a core will ultimately reveal nothing more than the void, the dark veiled source of existence itself. However, this chaos does not render life meaningless or absurd. The Apollonian is the drive to impose form, structure, and beauty onto the chaotic Dionysian substrate. The Apollonian art drive allows us to craft the masks, roles, and narratives through which we make sense of ourselves and the world. These masks are not merely disguises, but acts of creation, enabling us to confront the chaos of existence by transforming it into something comprehensible and meaningful. Nietzsche sees this tension between the Dionysian and Apollonian as the essence of human existence itself. The absence of a true self beneath the mask is not a failing or a defect. It is a testament to the artistic nature of life. The masks we wear, the roles we play, and the selves we create are not barriers to authenticity, but expressions of the creative force within us. It is through this perpetual act of creation that we justify our existence and find redemption in the world we build. It is only as aesthetic phenomenon that existence and the world are eternally justified. According to Nietzsche, the drama of life is the comedy of art, created by the primordial one for its own entertainment, of which it is both creator and spectator. Life in this view is a self-sustaining artistic act, where the primordial force simultaneously shapes and observes its creation, blending the roles of artist and audience into a singular, eternal performance. This must above all be clear, to our humiliation and exaltation, that the entire comedy of art is not put on for us at all, for our improvement or education, and that we are just as little the true creators of that world of art. We must rather assume that we are simply images and artistic projections for the primordial one, and have our highest dignity in our significance as works of art. For it is only as aesthetic phenomenon that existence and the world are eternally justified, while of course our consciousness of this significance is hardly different from that which the soldiers painted on a canvas have of the battle represented on it. We are the living manifestations of cosmic suffering, transient vessels through which the primordial will seeks its momentary redemption. In the tension between Apollo's luminous dream and Dionysus' raw, dissolving ecstasy, we emerge as fleeting illusions, art-driven apparitions seeking transfiguration through the radiant veils of illusion. Our existence is the world's desperate attempt to visualize its own fundamental pain, to momentarily transcend the abyss of eternal becoming through the sublime artifice of appearance. At first glance, this idea may seem to strip us of significance, reducing us to mere artistic creations, crafted for the amusement of life's governing forces. Yet Nietzsche offers us a path to reclaim dignity, not by resisting this view, but by identifying with the primordial world artist in the act of creation. In doing so, we become simultaneously poet, actor, and spectator, actively engaging with the artistry of existence. By embracing the opposition between chaos and form, the unbridled energy of the Dionysian and the shaping order of the Apollonian, we transform ourselves from passive recipients of life's shaping forces into active participants in its eternal creation. Through this, life's aesthetic justification becomes our own. Rather than succumbing to resignation or despair, a real danger posed by this perspective, we can choose to actively participate in the process of artistic creation. Through this act, we connect with the world artist, embracing the creative energy that animates existence. In our art, we often express what we revere, elevating our imaginings by manifesting them into tangible forms. When we approach ourselves as works of art, we do the same. We affirm, refine, and honor our existence. As Nietzsche wrote, art is essentially the affirmation, the blessing, and the deification of existence. To live artistically is to imbue our lives with meaning, for as he urges in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, one must give value to their existence by behaving as if one's very existence were a work of art. While the art of masking and playing roles may often signify an inauthentic way of living, it can also be a profoundly authentic way to live, if we engage in the process honestly and with purpose, becoming poets of our own lives. This falseness with a good conscience, emerges when we are fully aware that we are presenting a construction to the world and consciously embrace the role we are playing. Nietzsche speaks of higher human beings who cultivate the habit of seeing and hearing thoughtfully rather than remaining mere spectators and listeners before the great play of sights and sounds that is life. Nor are they merely actors in this drama. Instead, they become true poets and continuous creators of life. The artist and poet further life's interests precisely because they are masters of drawing veils over themselves and the world. This art of semblance is not merely a human invention, but a fundamental drive of life itself. As Nietzsche writes, life has not been devised by morality. It wants deception, it lives on deception. To live is to interpret, and to interpret is to create. Nietzsche critiques philosophers who unconsciously strip away the veils that blanket truth, exposing a rawness that life itself resists. As Nietzsche starkly reminds us, the truth is ugly. We have art so we don't perish of the truth. For Nietzsche, the importance of art lies not in what it represents, but in its function for life. Art does not eliminate life's chaos. Instead, it transforms that chaos into a comprehensible narrative. It provides us with a mask, not as mere deception, but as a creative transformation through which life becomes bearable. This reframing allows us to reconcile ourselves to the raw, indifferent forces of life by experiencing them as dramatic expressions of meaning. To live one's life as a work of art is to embrace the multiplicity within, allowing the many facets of the self to step into the light when their moment arrives. Just as an artist brings diverse elements into harmony, or a playwright directs a shifting cast of characters, we too must orchestrate the many roles we embody throughout the day. The self, as depth psychology reveals, is not a singular, unified entity, but a dynamic constellation of personas, each with its own purpose and voice. A truly creative life could redeem us from what Friedrich Schiller called the mechanical life of modern society, where individuals are reduced to a piecing together of an infinite number of lifeless parts. Chained to a single small fragment of the whole, people develop only as fragments, suppressing vast segments of their personalities. Ralph Waldo Emerson offered a haunting metaphor for this condition. The state of society is one in which the members have suffered amputation from the trunk and strut about so many walking monsters, a good finger, a neck, a stomach, an elbow, but never a man. Man is thus metamorphosed into a thing, into many things. This amputation from the trunk represents our alienation from ourselves. Instead of seeking meaning and purpose from within, we imitate others, losing connection with the eternal fountains of life. As Emerson observes, man does not stand in awe of man. His energy remains scattered, and rather than drawing from the eternal fountains of life, he ventures outward, begging for sustenance from the urns of other men. By passively identifying with the roles we play, we allow the mask to shape the face, leaving much of who we could be unexplored and undeveloped. Only by consciously embracing a creative existence can we escape this fragmentation and reclaim the wholeness of our humanity.